Life can do,
No.
human life can do what face is.
There you go.
That's icky, I just told him to come in.
Let me get that back though.
Hello, can you hear me?
No.
My name is Witanek, and first, I got a note from our keynote speaker who wasn't able to make it. She had a child care issue today, and she couldn't get coverage for her child, so she couldn't make it in from Philly. So I'm going to wing it as the keynote speaker, and what I did was I studied the our first major decarceration panel discussion presentation by Johanna Fernandez. Is this, do I really need this?
You don't know.
No.
Okay. And basically I'm going to paraphrase her original presentation. Anything you like about it is hers. Anything you don't like about it, blame me. Johanna Fernandez is one of the leaders of the movement to free Mumia Abu-Jamal. She's an advisor of that movement. She's a leader of academics for Mumia Abu-Jamal. She's also writing a book on the Young Lords Puerto Rican freedom fighter movement, which was like a Puerto Rican group that was modeled after the Black Panthers in the 60s and 70s. And she's got a book coming out in this summer probably. So this is a kind of a abbreviated version of her presentation. Michelle Alexander wrote The New Jim Crow, which has done the math on mass incarceration and has unmasked it for what it is. The means to repress, first and foremost, the black and other of-color populations of this country, as well as the impoverished. Calling it the New Jim Crow essentially means it is the new racism in the post-civil rights era. Over the last 30 years, black, Latino, indigenous, and impoverished have been under full-scale attack, and mass incarceration is about punishing poverty and stopping people from fighting back. Today's event, which has united sectors of Bridgeton and the state, and built unity in its promotion, in the outreach, in the preparation of food, the launching of a new petition shows the true hope of what can be done in poor neighborhoods throughout New Jersey to bring about a new day of struggle to change the equation of mass incarceration. In the last 40 years, our schools have been privatized, force-feeding facts, and test-taking instead of the ability to think and analyze. The only way forward for our struggle is to turn these things around, is for us to educate ourselves at events such as the one we are having right now, where we bring out the root causes of our problems so that we can get to systemic solutions. Critical thinking for our young people is key, and that can only come about from our seizing educational initiatives through events like today. The Russian novelist Dostoevsky, who wrote the classic Crime and Punishment, stated, "The degree of civilization in a society can be judged by entering its prisons." The nation that considers itself the land of the free, but we imprison the most people in the world. We have 6% of the world's population, but 25% of the world's prisoners. Yet the U.S. is in the Middle East, Latin America, and Asia, deploying military might and subterfuge, telling the rest of the world about freedom and democracy. Instead, U.S. is not the most free, but one of the most repressive societies on the planet. Until you have been behind walls, and admittedly I have not been, we have no way of grasping the brutal genocide that mass incarceration represents. In California, when 1,300 men went on a hunger strike, they were protesting the rationing of food because of slashes to budgets due to the economic crisis. They demanded permission to form cultural associations. The hiring of a full-time doctor, because medical care is also rationed and often denied to incarcerated persons. Thousands die in prisons due to lack of adequate health care. They were demanding the permission to smile in photographs with their visiting family members. Imagine the emotional dehumanization of preventing an incarcerated person from smiling with their family in a photo on visitation day. And when we dehumanize a prisoner, we dehumanize ourselves as well. The U.S. has 100,000 people in solitary, being tortured as defined by the United Nations. What that means is that the prison systems are intentionally instilling insanity in those that have been incarcerated, which is for more than just the 100,000, as prisoners are routinely rotated through that process. Human beings are social animals, and forcing that form of isolation makes the prisoner insane. 50,000 children are in detention centers across the United States. These are immigrants pushed from their home in Latin America by policies propagated by multinational corporations in the United States to make profits for the 1%. Policies like NAFTA that destroys local economies and forces farmers out of business. What kind of nation demonizes and violates the rights of 50,000 children? Of course, there is the day-to-day, unimaginable suffering of prisoners in the violent prisoner environment. Prisoners take the human being, a social being, and destroy and deploy violence on the part of guards, the lack of health care, the day-to-day humiliation, the random denial of rights and privileges. That is why we need to hear directly from those who have been through the system to fully understand what mass incarceration is doing to those dragged through the gulags of the United States. In 1970, the U.S. had about 300,000 behind walls. Today, about 2.4 million are locked away.
I got that.
As mentioned, we have 6% of the world's population, 25% of the world's prisoners. Here's another statistic. 1 in 10 of the world's prisoners is an African American male. Think of that. 1 in 10 of the world's prisoners is an African American male. Do your best to think about that and get your mind around that fact. African American males represent a minuscule fraction of a percent of the world's population, yet 10% of the world's population is African American male. Does the word genocide come to mind? That means that African American males are more than 10 times as likely to be in prison than everybody else on the planet, in every other country, not just in this country. There are 7.4 million people under criminal supervision by the state apparatus of the United States, which includes parole and probation. And parolees can tell you that there is no rehabilitation involved, only the setting of traps leading to return to prison. Your parole officer is looking for any little infraction to send you back. It is up to us to become the top experts in these issues, to study, to understand, and to be able to explain these issues to each other, to our children, to our organizations, and to those that hold power. For the last 40 years, we have been lied to about crime, about who is guilty and who is not. The United States has lots of criminals. You can find them on Wall Street, in the corporate board offices, and they will never spend a day in prison. 75% of prisoners are people of color, even though blacks, Latinos, and whites commit crimes in equal portions to our percentage of the population. That statistic means that the policy of mass incarceration is racist by definition. It is the new Jim Crow, as per Michelle Alexander. Mass incarceration was accelerated initially just as black people in the United States got the right to vote. Mass incarceration was accelerated as a punishment to black and Latino people for standing up, beginning in the 60s and 70s, and saying no to racism. Mass incarceration is about punishing those populations that dare to fight back against their super oppression. Black people in this nation, from enslavement days and beyond, were the super oppressed labor that built the original foundation of today's capitalist organizations, conglomerations. In the 50s through the 60s and 70s, the United States black, brown, and indigenous population said enough, nada, basta. We are no longer open for your super exploitation beatdown. 70% of those in prison are there for victimless crimes. It was in the 70s that the United States began to massively incarcerate those not engaged in violence, mostly people of color, involved in drug use or drug sales. In most states, including New Jersey, a felony means you can't vote. You can't vote while you're in prison. So on a very basic level, mass incarceration is intentionally designed to disenfranchise the black and brown populations from voting after so many years of civil rights struggle to gain that right. Many are starting to use the term to switch it from mass incarceration to hyper-incarceration, to highlight that it is certain sectors of the population that are targeted, not everybody, and certainly not the wealthy. The underlying, beneath the surface government message of tough on crime is what white people in this country need to be, is that white people in this country need to be protected from the crimes committed by people of color. There is a repetitious message in media, in movies, in TV shows, on the internet, on radio commentary, that people of color are lazy, refuse to work, and they are undeserving freeloaders. That is what we are sold. That black people have a criminal nature and need to be punished and contained. The story that is told is that crime is growing and that we need more people in prison, more cops, more laws to protect mainstream, read white America. But the reality is that throughout U.S. history, crime rates have remained the same. They have not increased. The acceleration of mass incarceration was a response to the joblessness that resulted in our cities when the crisis of deindustrialization and resulting joblessness hit over 40 years ago. Of the 2.4 million of people in prison, half of them were unemployed upon the time they were arrested. The other half reported an annual income of under $10,000. Obviously, not enough to survive in the United States. The bottom line is that mass incarceration does not address the issue of crime, but is more about the inability of the system to meet the needs of people, and especially the impoverished and people of color. During the period of acceleration, we have seen the elimination of social welfare programs, the increasing of class stratification on the one hand, and on the other, the buildup of prisons and the buildup of mass incarceration. According to a Harvard economist, between 1973 and 1978, the United States saw the largest wealth transfer ever in the history of the world, from the bottom up to the top. That usually happens in other countries due to a war or a military coup, but here it happened quietly. At that time, the New York Times was reporting that an American is 5 times as likely to be a victim of a layoff on their job than a violent crime. So the war on crime is more about scapegoating people of color and impoverished to confuse the white working class about the real issues in the United States. The end of the American dream. Imprisonment and incarceration industry is the 3rd largest employer, including judges, clerks, guards, the people that provide the food, the equipment, the construction, the security equipment, the police. What kind of nation is it that employs so many millions in the business of caging human beings and dehumanizing them? It is a society that is doomed to fail. So now we have mass incarceration serving as a jobs program for communities like Bridgeton and others that house the human encaged in basically cities like Southwoods. On this date that Martin Luther King was assassinated, April 4th, remember Dr. King's words when he said, "America, you must be reborn again." While people of color have felt the brunt of this issue of mass incarceration, the massive surveillance of the prison population has now been mainstreamed to the point where everything you do, on the phone, on the internet, in your car, even in your home in front of your television, is electronically monitored and captured for analysis by government agency. Those of us who thought that we have escaped the plight of the incarcerated are now subjected to the scrutiny of living in an open-air prison society, which the United States is currently. That was basically a summarization of the presentation by Johanna Fernandez. I'm going to very quickly go over what the 6-point program of Decarcerate the Garden State, which is a plan of action, and then ask Renee to talk a little bit about trying to formulate Southwood Families United to build a support mechanism for those that are incarcerated. Our
What?
your phone's ringing.
I know that.
Okay. Our 6-point program.
I'm not answering.
One is legislative. We're fighting for a New Jersey Decarceration Act, which would reduce 50% of the New Jersey's prisoners over a 4-year period, which would take the money spent, $53,000 per prisoner, and instead bring it back to the communities for jobs projects, for re-entry projects, for infrastructure that creates a community that does not send so many people to prison. Also on a local level today, we'd like to, I'm going to pass around this petition, calling for some changes to how Bridgeton is policed. And in it, there's like 5 points, 6 points altogether. One's a demand of the people, but 5 demands of the local government. Review the current docket and a list of pending charges and dismiss charges for local offenses in Bridgeton. Enact an immediate moratorium on low-level marijuana arrests in Bridgeton. Pass an ordinance for the decriminalization of marijuana, as was done in Philadelphia. Go in a new direction for police. Put an end to stop and frisk, broken window type law enforcement. I heard Felicia talking about how they're pulling everyone over in town. End that. And the mayor has and the council has the power to do that because they hire and oversee the policing. Pass a resolution to urge the State Assembly, Senate, and Governor to introduce and pass the New Jersey Decarceration Act, and then demanding of the community that we call for a citywide effort to work in coalition to develop projects that create livable wage jobs and positive activities for the youth and others in the community. That's the petition. We discussed it on the group. There was a lot of support for it. So I'll sign it, and I'm going to pass it around. If you could sign it, and when we get 100 people on a petition, we'll go to the council meeting, and we'll present it.
They
Next.
also need to put on, like housing, some people that go to prison, when they come home, they can't get a housing because they, first thing they do, they check their background.
And that's
If you got a drug
that's
charge, you're not gonna be able, if you got a sexual assault charge, you're not gonna be able to move into the apartment.
and
So
that-
they
that's
also need to
a
put that on,
that's a federal thing we have to
Right.
fight.
Yeah.
And the REDEEM Act that's being proposed by Cory Booker does not address the housing issue,
Okay.
and it should. Okay, next point of action is media. You've seen our paper. We also got a lot of internet operations going. We invite writers. If you are a writer, you could write for our paper, you could write for our blog site. And I do a lot of the writing, but we want to diversify and bring more people and get more people involved in it. And even if you don't think you're a great writer, we can clean up the grammar, but you got ideas. You all have great ideas, and we can put it all together. So we do that. We have this operation called Tour de Decarcarate, where we take these events from town to town. This is our 4th one of the year so far in 2015. So if you know another community that would like to organize an event, we can come back to Bridgeton again in the future, and we'll continue to do that. 4th point is study, reading the book, but also there's a lot of information on the internet. We all need to become the experts. We can't always get experts to come out. Obviously, I'm having trouble with experts canceling at the last minute at events. So for all the experts, we can all speak to each other, speak intelligently on the streets, and also when we go to the council meeting, to the state assembly, to the governor's house, we can speak with intelligence and with knowledge. And so we all could form study groups, learn and discuss these issues, etc. 5th, we're developing a means to communicate with the incarcerated and to both in and out. And this is the first time ever what we did in order to promote this event, we went to the prison and we were prevented from handing out, although we did get about 20 letters out to visitors at the prison, but also we mailed some letters in, and we have one person here who heard from her incarcerated loved one in the prison. So the word went around in the prison. So even though we don't have like hundreds of family members here, they know that we're here, and that gives hope. But also, the communication needs to come out, and we need to be able to carry the stories that are going on inside the prison and make it known. Because when people are assaulted and shot in the street, like has happened twice recently in this very neighborhood, murdered, often there's witnesses, often there's video, and that helps get the word out. But when it happens inside a facility, nobody knows. And there's many ways to kill inside facilities. Bad food, denial of medical care, just leaving somebody in the wrong crowd, etc. We'll get to questions in a little bit. So the communication, two-way communication, and we got a whole idea of working to send letters into all the prisons about what we're doing, and inviting them to send information out, and to invite their family members to get involved in the struggle. And the other important part, which falls hand in glove with that, is a justice committee, where when we hear about stuff going on inside a facility, that we can advocate and we can get everybody to call the warden and say, restore the visitation rights, fix the food, fix the water, let that person have their medical attention, or we're watching you and we know that you just killed somebody there. Also, the Justice Committee also calls for freedom for political prisoners, relief for those unjustly convicted and incarcerated, and Renee's going to talk a little bit about that, I'm sure. Anyway, so that's our 6-point plan. It's a plan of action, because we have problems, we need to take action. I'm going to now turn it over to Renee, and she's going to, I'm not going to give her a big introduction, she'll let her introduce herself. You need to